my name is Lisa Dillivan, Lisadillivan. Today is Wednesday, February 9th, 2011 at 3:30 p.m. I am interviewing Mr. Albert Crowley. Mr. Crowley, can you please spell your name for us?
Albertcrowley.
Great. And before we get into the interview questions, I just have a few preliminary questions for you. Can you tell me what dates you worked at RCA?
Okay, I started in actually June 30th, 1958, and I retired in the spring, I don't recall, about April of 1992.
And what was your job title?
I was a principal engineer.
How did you get your job at RCA?
That's an interesting story, too. I graduated from Pratt Institute, and when I was a senior, I wasn't thinking much about RCA. I kind of thought that they were an entertainment company of TVs and radios, and that didn't sound too exciting, which I was later to find out I was completely wrong about that. But anyway, RCA, the big companies, they would send people out to recruit engineers to our company. And when the person from RCA was there, I decided to talk to him. And he mentioned something about a graduate study program, and that sounded kind of interesting. And he told me that RCA was going to hire about 60 engineers, and if you qualified, you'd get on the graduate study program. And the way it worked, you would work part-time at RCA, and then you would go to the University of Pennsylvania part-time, and they would pay all expenses at the University of Pennsylvania. And the only thing is we got paid for the time we worked at RCA, but not for the time we were going to school. And at that time we had lots of overtime, and like a lot of engineers, I didn't have a lot of money, and we worked a lot of overtime to try and get our salary close to what it would be if we had worked full time. And then RCA got a call from the University of Pennsylvania, and they were saying that some of the engineers weren't keeping up with their studies. And when RCA looked into it, the coordinator looked into it, he found out these engineers were working all this overtime. So the company decided to ban overtime for engineers on the program, and they made it mandatory that we work 3 days a week, go to school 2 days a week, but they agreed to pay us for full time, so we got paid for 5 days, even though we were only working there 3. And that was really a great thing. And I think this program benefited both RCA and the company. I'd say about half of the 60 engineers who were on the program stayed with RCA. The others left. And I think we got some of the top engineers as a result of that program, and some of the top managers. In fact, John Rittenhouse was Senior VP for the Government Systems Division, and he was on that program also.
Can you describe what you did at RCA?
Excuse me?
Can you describe what you did at RCA?
Oh, okay, I was an engineer, and I started in Moorestown, and I worked about a year there, and then I transferred to Camden, Government Systems Division. And there, one thing about RCA is that they had really a very diverse I guess what I'm trying to say is that they had many different projects. You could work on all kinds of projects, and you never know what you would be assigned to. And because sometimes you would get on a project and you didn't really know too much about it. But RCA was such a diverse company that you could always find someone who was an expert in that field, and they were always willing to help you.
What kinds of wages and benefits did you earn at RCA?
Benefits, are you talking about salary, hospitalization, and things like that?
Yep.
They had all those kind of benefits, and I think RCA was a company that really treated its employees very well. I guess that's one of the reasons I stayed there for 34 years. retirement benefits, you could take a lump sum, which would have been about $180,000. But he would have to pay somewhere around $50,000 to $60,000 to get these benefits. And of course, that's a no-brainer if you have the $50,000 to $60,000. Unfortunately, he didn't have that money, and the interviewer told him, "Well, we'll take that out of your $180,000 lump sum." So they essentially gave him $120,000 that they didn't have to do. And I don't think you could get that kind of consideration today.
What were your relationships with your coworkers like?
I'm having a little trouble hearing. Are you on a speakerphone here?
Yes. I'll try to speak up. What were your relationships with your coworkers like?
Oh, very good. In fact, I made an awful lot of friends, and a lot of all our social contacts, with people at RCA, and they, we were always treated very well by management, at least in my estimation.
Were there a variety of ethnic groups when you worked at RCA?
Variety of what?
A variety of ethnic groups?
Oh, yes. In fact, yeah. We had Korean people, Chinese, blacks, just about everything, really.
What were your working conditions like?
Well, that was one thing about RCA. At the Camden facility, we had a building that was built in 1903 or something like that. And when we first started, we were a little bit better off than people who started before us because the building wasn't even air conditioned. But it was a drafty building, and sometimes it could be cold in the winter. But I think the kind of work that we would do was really very satisfying. Really didn't make that a really bad consideration. What I used to do, although it was not legal, I brought in a little electric heater and I would put it under my desk, in the winter, and that would keep me warm.
What was one of your most memorable experiences working at RCA?
There was one particular job that I worked on that I really liked, and we had a subcontractor. We were a subcontractor from Motorola, and we had to develop what we call a distance measuring system. This was a little module that was going to be put in a rescue radio for downed airmen that Motorola was building. And at the time, we had some pretty tight specs. The size was very small. It had to be less than 1 cubic inch, and power consumption was, a couple of milliwatts. Was very, very low. And there were systems of this type designed before, but the problem was they used analog circuits, and analog circuits tend to be large, and they use a lot of power. So I had to come up with some kind of a system that wouldn't have these disadvantages. And the way to do it was to do it with digital circuits. And RCA had developed what they call CMOS digital circuits. It's complementary MOS circuits. And they could